a proposed budget that's posted online. EMS and fire, we did a review of salaries and the calculations, and it's quite complex with the 24-hour shifts. And we were able to reduce that by about $200,000. So this is a little bit, quite a bit of a reduction from last week. This is a summary of the revenues and expenditures for the general fund. And more or less the big takeaways here is the largest increase is in taxes, penalties, and interest. And mostly it's taxes. The property taxes are budgeted at just over a 7% increase from this year. And no millage rate is budgeted in this budget. And also the local option sales tax is budgeted at a 15% increase. And the largest expenditure increase you can see are salaries and benefits. And that is a result of the salary survey, an adjustment to county salaries, and also new. So this is just the highlights and changes to salaries and benefits for the general fund. And base salaries are increasing by almost 2.7 million. And the Social Security and retirement are all based on percentages. So of course that goes up to a total of 3.2 million increase. And again, those increases are from the salary adjustments that are being proposed, and also the new positions which are listed there. There's part-time to full-time in human resources, an election technician that's going part-time to full-time, a new position in planning, building inspector, and there's 15 new positions for the sheriff's office, which is 2 investigators, a school resource officer, 2 Marine Patrol, and 10 jailers. And that $715,000 is included in figures above. So this is a depiction, a chart of the increases, and we're just looking at base salaries, just to see how they landed throughout all the funds. And of course, exactly what you would expect, the general fund has the most of the salary increase, 88%. And the other funds, Curbside has an increase of just under 1%. 911 is about a 2% increase. ARPA is up there because we don't have an actual budget established for this year, although it does require a budget adjustment. It looks like, but the person said, Mr. Landon has been working here throughout the year. The unincorporated fund has an increase of 43,000, and that's almost a 2% increase. And solid waste has an increase of 59,000, 5%. Down in the left-hand corner, you can see that not included is 2 Rivers. It's not that they were not affected by the salary survey. It's just that there was an adjustment to part-time wages, so the net actually decreased. I wanted to be clear. So this breaks out the general fund and how the salary increases affect each of the different areas within the general fund. So as you can see, public safety has about a 73% increase, or they're taking up 73% of that 2.67 million increase. So they've got the largest percent. Public works is 3%, and planning development 4%, leisure services under 0.5%, general government is 14%, and judiciary 4%. And all those other areas, of course, are all smaller areas. So subsequently, it's small. The next slide, please. And what this does is it takes the public safety that we had on the previous slide, and it breaks it out on how it's being allocated to the different areas of public safety. So EMS and fire are receiving about 18%. Animal control 1%, which again, it's a small department, and EMS and video under 0.5%. And again, that's a small department. And the majority of it, almost 81%, is going to the sheriff's office, parole, jail, SROs, and 9. And these are just some of the budget highlights, just in addition to, of course, the salary and benefits was the majority of the change. There's some other items that are affecting the budget. Methodology report for planning and development. It's actually an $86,000 report. $66,000 is being funded by the general fund, and $20,000 would be funded by impact fee fund. GIS enterprise software for the tax assessor of $30,000, but that's offset a bit from another department, planning, with a reduction in a contract with CRC for GIS service. The district attorney had requested an operating cost of $48,000. Capital improvement funding, we're funding it for $1,000 fund. Election poll workers was an bad debt expense. We're increasing it by $150,000, and there were insurance increase costs of $64,000, and of course fuel for $38,000. The fuel would have been much more, but we did do a budget amendment about 3 months ago, a pretty significant one. So this is just adjusting it a little bit further based on what's happening lately. Next one. This is just a summary of curbside collections, and that's the trash collections. The revenues and expenses are $1.4 million for the year, and that is a significant increase over the current year of 29%. And that is caused by, we do have a new contract with Meridian Waste, and we also have some we have some fee increases to customers, which is increasing the revenue. And you can see that in order to balance the budget, we had to allocate in from the unincorporated fund $291,000 to balance the budget, and that's from insurance premium tax. And that is an increase from the current year of $58,000.
And just a footnote to that kind of stuff, after the new contract with Meridian, the quarterly payment to net zero on that to have no impact on the general fund, the rates would have gone to around 85, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
I think that we did a modest increase, I think from the current rate of around 45. Wasn't it?
Yes, currently quarterly, I believe it's $46.95.
46, whatever.
$46.95 currently.
And then we moved it up to.
I believe it was 52, but
52 was what was in my head.
Yeah. So I would have to verify that, but I believe that.
The point being, we're subsidizing the curbside pickup.
Quite a bit.
And hopefully this will be incremented over the coming years, to go from 46 to 85, I realize is a huge jump. But that was because of the contract.
Correct. And the next, back to 911, please. And this is the 911 emergency fund, and the revenues and expenses are $1.7 million. And the majority of the funding does come from, if you look on your cell phone bill, there is a line item for 911 services, and that is collected by the state and then distributed to the counties. But even with that, we still, something just happened. There we go. Even with those collections, we still need to subsidize that fund for operations, salaries, and regular operations from the general fund, and also use existing fund balance to balance it. And you can see that that's over $500,000 to balance that budget. So we're collecting about $1.2 million in fees off of cell phones.
And historically, that's been a point of contention, is how the state divvies up that $1.50.
Correct. Yeah.
As you might imagine, the bulk of it goes in the Atlanta area. And,
Not quite sure, but right.
Yeah. It's not here. We're not getting our, I don't think we're getting our cut, fully.
It's not enough to fund the department.
No. And it's not like we're overstaffed and overpaid or anything like that. It's just another something that we have to deal with. I know the ACCG all have been working with trying to get that funding allocation they've argued about it for years and ever since I've been here. And it's still, your 911, your cell phones have always been an issue because you have a lot of folks here with cell phone numbers that for other states, not alone, just other counties, that are now here, and people nowadays keep your cell phone where they are. And, it's just, but they're paying it here. Anyway, go ahead, just kind of interject some things as we go because I won't remember when you get to the end.
Okay, next slide. And the next fund is the Unincorporated Service District, and the revenues and expenses there are almost 3.6 million. And the revenues come from property taxes and also insurance premium tax, which is budgeted at over $1 million. But you can see that normally almost 1.3 million would come into this fund, but we're allocating that $291,000 to Curbside.
Correct.
And to balance this budget, we also are using fund balance of over $900,000. And this is funding, the majority of the funding goes to EMS fire. All of the services for EMS fire, we calculate a split each year. And for fiscal year 23, it's a split of 88% of the costs go to EMS and 12% of the costs go to this particular department. And this year they are funding quite a few capital equipment purchases, which are 2 tankers, 2 engines, and some tools for the engines totaling $1.5 million. And this fund also funds PSA recreation. And at this point, we had an estimate of what our fiscal years don't coincide. So we had an estimate from their finance director of what the budget increase would be, which is $26,000. The next fund is solid waste, and that budget is $7.4 million for revenues and expenses, and that's a reduction. And it's not a reduction in sales or services, it's really a reduction in capital outlay. So things are, running there pretty well, and I believe that there was, or I know that there is, a rate increase for out-of-county residents or out-of-county services. So it doesn't affect the residents of the county, but there was a rate increase in there.
Not just the county, it doesn't affect the city of St. Mary's, Connecticut, but all them.
We don't have, correct.
Any little bit, there's no rate increases affecting the county or city.
Correct.
Even the commercial vendors that service those as well.
This is Two Rivers Gun Range, and overall we're showing a reduction from the current fiscal year of almost 13%. So revenues and expenses are $300,000. And the range just opened in November, so we're still working on startup costs, things like that. But overall, we were able to make some reductions in hours budgeted. So that's what that really reflects. So this year we are expecting $300,000 in revenues. Next, please. This slide, we didn't cover this last week. This is the CDBG grants, and I just thought it was significant enough to just explain a little bit. The CDBG mitigation grant there's no local match on that, and we're expecting to receive a total of $5.5 million. It'll be split between fiscal year 23 and 24, just depending on how the resiliency center renovations go. It might be a little bit more, it might be a little bit less, but I'm budgeting a 50-50 split. And it's also for replacing the radio communication tower and system migration to 800 megahertz. And again, there's no local match on that. And there's a CDBG planning grant of $350,000, and that's updating our local emergency operation plan.
And the radio migration thing, back years ago when we started all the tower replacements and bringing the VHS system, VHF, not VHS, VHF systems up to speed, functioning properly. I think Kevin Chaney can probably speak to that. That's all working very well now. And, in my mind, we were to go and try to go to the 800, but it was just something that we could not afford at the time. So we got this grant. Plus, it was planned all along to get there with the VHF being a backup and alternate system in times of emergency if needed, and just for resiliency purposes, which is one of the reasons we got the grant to,
Yes.
bring us all up to the 800 system. That's predominantly buying the radios.
Excuse me?
I said that's predominantly buying the radios. If I'm not mistaken.
The radios, like the handhelds and all that would
Right,
be
that's
purchased.
right, that's
ARPA.
ARPA, that's
This is
right.
actually bringing the towers.
This is the
up
towers,
to,
right.
800 megahertz. And again, there's no local match on that.
Right.
This is the capital expenditure fund, and we're funding it this year $400,000, and we had existing fund balance of 250. So the budget for the year is $650,000. And that's just a list of the items. Some of the items are just building improvements, a steel and storage building for the sheriff's office, the clerk of court, replacing some chairs. They haven't had new chairs in, I think, 15 years, et cetera. So that's just a list of the expenditures. The reduction of 7.61 is just the natural flow of some years we spend more, some years we spend less.
And the clerk of court,
Yes.
did that not include some of the furniture that goes into the new courtroom, or is that this is separate?
No, this is
Okay,
just replacing all the chairs.
right.
All the chairs. Yes, sir. And the next fund is SPLOST 8, and that's the 1% sales tax. And the revenues and expenses budgeted for this year are $15 million. And as we collect that, the county acts as we distribute that to the city. There's a certain portion that goes to St. Mary's, Woodbine, and Kingsland, and also PSA. So we distribute that to them monthly as we receive it. But the total gross revenue received is $15 million. The sales tax increase in collections that I'm budgeting is 2.8 million. And also we have another grant, a CDBG grant that was received for funding the new health department facilities. It's also going to be partially funded by the cities, the county. There's a line item in SPLOST for it, and also the grant. So I'm budgeting this year that all of that together would be $2.6 million.
And there is no land acquisition cost now. It's right now going over next, across the street from the hospital. So this is just all construction cost.
Correct. And just some of the expenditures that we're budgeting for: security upgrades, in buildings improvements, vehicles, 3 vehicles for the sheriff's office. And also there's an existing lease with the sheriff's office for 15 vehicles. And that's just the annual cost, $192,000. And also the budget is to start the building improvements on the fleet facility, public works and fleet facility, and also rehab to just all the buildings within the county, all the county-owned buildings.
Right.
So that's part of the budget. The next fund is the ARPA fund. And I know that we've actually had special meetings just on ARPA, but this is the list of the planned expenditures for the year. So building improvements of 1.7 million, vehicles of 1.9 million, which is 14 vehicles purchased for the sheriff's office for $1 million, 16 vehicles leased, and that $233,000 is the first year of lease payments on that. A coroner, he had requested a van, etc. Computer software, hardware, 470,000, radios, 1 million, other equipment, 697,000, and public works, 400,000. These are just a miscellaneous. Camden House, a one-time allocation of $10,000, etc. So that totals almost $6.4 million expenditures budgeted for fiscal year 23. And this next slide is just a summary of where we are with ARPA. So far to date, we've spent $900,000. The fiscal year 23 budget was the 6.4 million, and projected over the course of the next 2 years after that, we would have building improvements, which is the health department facility that I was talking about earlier, of 387,000. Radios, that's half of what you were talking about, the actual expenditures.
The 800 megahertz radio.
Right, and that's going to be a $1.6 million expenditure where I've got half of it budgeted and kind of crossing years.
Right.
Other equipment of 734,000, So all of that together, we still have a remaining balance of almost $900,000 after those expenditures are made. But again, those are budgeted and plans.
Right.
The next slide is a summary of Sheriff's Office expenditures through capital improvements, ARPA, and SPLOST, and also the general fund of just capital equipment. Kind of the top half is capital equipment purchases that are happening in fiscal year 23. And the bottom half are the new positions and the salary increases based on the salary survey. So all of that totals almost $6 million. And the next slide, this is just a list of all of our funds. I've talked about most of these up here, but there are some small funds that, not that they're not important, but they're very specialized. There's not a lot of money that goes through it, but it's very specialized in how we could, it's very restricted on how we spend the money. And so the total budgets of all funds for Gwinnett County is just over $80 million. So that's all I've got.
All right. Any commissioners have any questions for Ms. Gonzalez? None.
Okay, thank you so much.
No, no, sir.
Oh, thank you, Chuck. Forgot you were out there, buddy. Trevor, you online yet?
I'm online. I'm out here too. How are you doing this evening?
Do you have any question for Ms. Gonzalez concerning the proposed budget?
I do not. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez.
You're welcome.
All right. All right. Do we have any?
Yes. First will be Mr. Steve Wendell.
And considering the number, we're going to put a 5-minute cap on these. I think that's pretty generous.
Thank you. My name is Steve Winkle, Harriet's Bluff. I want to speak to the use of ARPA funds for what appears to be an illegal application of expenses under the ARPA rules. I have read approximately 200 pages of ARPA rules, including the full regulation as printed in the Federal Register, and including the questions and answers under the final rules. And I want to read very quickly one simple paragraph. It's fairly short. Capital expenditures, which are expenditures for equipment that has a value that lasts for more than 1 year, like CCSO patrol cars, are subject to the same eligibility standard as other eligible uses to respond to the pandemic's public health and economic impacts. Specifically, they must be related and reasonably proportional to the pandemic impact identified and reasonably designed to benefit the impacted population or class. For the life of me, I cannot understand how the majority of the projects under the ARPA plan, which we just looked at, how those qualify under the very explicit rules for capital expenditures under ARPA. Now, you may be getting advice that you can spend the money that way, but I can assure you there are members of the community who are very concerned that the affected populations, those that were harmed by COVID and COVID shutdowns, are not those people who are employed by Camden County government, but those members of the community who had no resiliency to withstand the shutdowns or the loss of jobs or the loss of homes that were imposed on them. It would have taken less than 10 minutes for each of you individually to discover the paragraph that I just read. And that should have raised serious questions in the use of ARPA funds for things that would normally be capital expenses for the county that should be budgeted in the normal expenses of the county. But instead, you look at ARPA funds as being a windfall for your wish list of either desired or necessary things. Now, I believe the county has an obligation to provide the cars for the sheriff's department. But I think that using a windfall that is intended for the individuals in the community who are harmed by COVID in order to provide those is an absolute disservice to your constituents. And I would argue that you will find that complaints filed to the Treasury Department will possibly have to change those plans. Just the numbers that we just looked on that presentation show that you intend to spend enough funds from two different sources to buy 31 buy or lease 31 vehicles in this year's budget for the sheriff's department. Are you aware that that's what was just up there? 31 vehicles, 16 leased, and 15 purchased? I just ran the numbers. 15 leased, no, I'm sorry, 16 leased and 15 purchased. That adds up to be 31. Are we that far behind? Has your budget been so poor for the last 4 years that y'all have been responsible for the budget, last 10 years that you've been responsible, that the sheriff's department is in such desperate shape? And you think that the one-time windfall from ARPA will solve all that? I notice in here that you have $250,000 in your budget for HVAC, heating and air conditioning unit replacements at one site, and another $198,885 at a second site. How can those be attributed to harm to your citizens who suffered during COVID? And so you can't tell me that those are not capital improvements, they're HVAC units.
Thank you, Mr. Winkle. That's time.
Point made.
Mr. Jim Goodman.
Please.
Are you allowed?
Mr. Goodman, do you want to speak or not?
Speak, but I want to wait until others have spoken.
Oh,
Oh.
I'm sorry, I thought you wanted to just break your
You
time.
can.
I apologize, I misunderstood.
Thank you, sister.
All right, who's next?
Next is Ms. Janet Ead. You here? Ms. Heath is not here, but she did submit a written comment on our speaker request form, and I'll make sure that's included.
Thank you.
She just didn't specify she wasn't going to be here.
That's all right. Who's next?
Next, I have Clinton Moxley.
Thank y'all for allowing me to speak here. First off, I would like to thank the Camden County Commissioners for the continued support of the Camden County Public Library. My apologies, Clint Moxley. I'm from Jessup. I'm the Regional Library Director for Three Rivers Regional Library System. All the libraries located in Camden County are under my directorship. Again, thank y'all for your support of the Camden County Public Library and your past year's support of the Woodbine Public Library. Woodbine is why I'm here tonight. I have seen that it was cut from the budget. It is funded by or it has been funded the last 3 years by the county at $30,000 a year. I would just like to request that the commission board think about putting it back in budget before the final vote. One of the things that public libraries in the state are governed by in regards to grants is that on a system level, if we lose funding to any of our libraries within our system, we run the risk of losing state grant money and federal grant money to the entire system. And therefore, if Woodbine is cut, it jeopardizes the whole system, which includes the Camden County Public Library, the St. Mary's Public Library, and the other 5 counties that I serve. Collectively, we have 9 libraries in the regional office. Each one of those is funded locally by tax collecting authorities. In Camden County here, the 2 that have historically supported the Woodbine Public Library is the Board of Education of Camden County and the Camden County Commissioners. The Camden County Commissioners have given 75% of the funding that we receive annually, and the Board of Commission, or I'm sorry, the Board of Ed has given 10,000. So I'm here tonight just to thank you again for the support that y'all have shown in the past. I ask that you please reconsider putting it back in the budget for the final budget vote next week. It is a great service that I believe we offer to not only the city of Woodbine, but also the north end of Camden County. We do serve a purpose. Because of COVID, we have not been able to do some of the programming that we normally would do, and this is system-wide. This is actually statewide. This year is the first year that we have been able to do a full summer reading program that we have done in previous years. We're already seeing numbers increase here in Woodbine. And I was personally at the Camden County Public Library kickoff, where they saw over 300 children that day come to the library. And so again, I'm just here to thank you all for the support that y'all given, and ask that you please reconsider adding it back to the budget. I will be happy to answer any questions if y'all have any between now and then. Ms. Gonzalez has my contact information, as well as Mr. Howard, the county manager. Please feel free to reach out, and that's all the time I'll take up to y'all, but thank you all.
Thanks, sir.
Miss Jackie Eichhorn?
Hold on, Ms. Icorn. I will make one comment as it relates to the Woodbine Library. One of the decisions that prompted it was, after looking at the latest financial statements we got, the Woodbine Library had a fund balance of north of $82,000, which is like 2.5 years worth of expenditures. So I don't see that there's detriment to the Woodbine Library operations. But like I said, we'll take it under advisement, what you said, and we'll look at it. Thank you.
Jackie Eichhorn, Woodbine, Merritt's Bluff. There were 2 areas of the budget that I was concerned about. The first is that there's no funding allocated for the space tour. I find that peculiar because in a recent commissioners meeting, there were some of the consultants were rehired for the next year, and I don't know where in the budget those salaries are budgeted. The second thing is the ARPA funds. I find that it's been a peculiar allocation, judging from what I think the government intended as far as serving the people that live in communities. The things are probably very necessary that the funds are going to, but I don't think that the ARPA funds are the proper source for that funding. I don't think it's even allowed by the regulations of the ARPA funds. I'm sure that there were several or many even nonprofits in the community who would have liked very much to have been consulted about how the funds were going to be spent. And one of the groups that I had the opportunity to see some letters, I know they personally wrote to the commissioners and to the 3 mayors. That was the Camden County chapter of the NAACP. They shared those with me, and the interim final rule for ARPA funds was issued in May of 2021. And a month after that, after they had had time to digest the regulations, they wrote 2 letters to you, 5 members of the commission, and also to the mayors, It was an opening gesture, and they sent it as just an initial offering with some suggestions for you. You never recontacted them to hear and sit down and have an actual dialogue with them. And I don't know if that's true of any other groups that might have approached you, but I do know because I checked to find out, and you did not contact them. These are excerpts from the general letter they sent you, June 14th, 2021. This is a quote. In presenting these suggestions, we emphasize that these are not the only possible uses that could accomplish the purposes of the American Rescue Plan. We offer them only as a starting point for what we hope will become a fruitful engagement with all of your constituents and communities. This is another quote from the same letter. The deadlines for allocating these funds are not as compressed as the deadlines to allocate the CARES Act funds last year. Specifically, the interim final rule that went into effect on May 17, 2021, says that the funds do not need to be fully obligated until December 31st, 2024, and they do not need to be fully spent until December the 31st, 2026. Congress intended a community's final allocations of ARPA funds to be a result of well-considered, community-involved deliberation and unhurried thought. Not only was the community not and concerned groups excluded from the ARPA decisions proposed in this budget, ARPA rules were ignored and violated. The things that you've allocated the funds would do nothing for families who lost their jobs, and perhaps women who suddenly had to take care of children who were not in school programs, and there was no money for that to happen, people that lost their homes, people who had unexpected hardships because of COVID. Your allocations do not reach those people who were the intended recipients of the funds. I hope you will reconsider also the Woodbine Library. It serves the north end of the county, and with gas prices the way they are, and with parents working, a lot of children can possibly get to the library by walking or riding bikes where they couldn't reach it by car if they have no transportation. I noticed that there was a cut in general to the library funds of $12,000. And it seems to me that is a cut that could possibly come out of some other budget and be returned to the libraries. They serve everyone in the county. I use the library frequently, and I know many of the people in this room do too. They work very hard with very little, and they provide an incredible community service. The same is true of the Woodbine Library, and the women at the Women's Club from Woodbine have done extraordinary work, and it's contributed their time for nothing to the community to do it. So please reconsider that in your final vote. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. What else, Kate?
I have to finish mine. Mr. Bengal. I'm sorry, Mr. Bengal.
Hey.
My name is Ben Goff. I live at Harris Bluff most days. In looking at the numbers that were presented a little bit earlier, I did not see county administration budget. I didn't see the increase of 10% about the county administrator. Anyway, it was there, slightly over. There's a very young man working in the Bell system I was approached by a representative from IBM Corporation concerning job openings for that company. Yeah, I remember this is 1966. As the pay offered was substantially higher at the time, I think it was $25 a week. I considered this and actually took the qualifying test and was offered the position. Next day or so, I approached my immediate supervisor concerning this, and he sat me down and explained the facts of life to me. If I said one more word regarding the possibility of leaving, then my termination from the bell system would be effective before Sunday. I went back to work as I had great employment. I enjoyed it. The facts in the corporate world are quite different than what I have observed in Camden County administration. I listened to the presentation our county administrator made to the commissioners in Seminole County. I hope you listened to it also. First, I was impressed by the quality of the questions from the commissioners. Really, I was. I was appalled at most of the responses provided by our county administrator, as they seemed to ramble and use repetitious terms inappropriately, best practices, had the luxury of associating with the space players, including Bill Gates. Luxury. I was not at all surprised that the Seminole County Commissioners declined all three candidates. And as to the Collier County Commissioners, I think that just happened. I just saw a snippet of it. They required background checks. I wonder how that fared. I think this is the fourth time in the last couple of years that our county administrator has sought employment someplace else. And I applaud anybody that looks for better and greener pastures. Bottom line for our 5 sitting commissioners, you have failed in many endeavors over the past few years. And the most egregious, you've allowed a contract employee to continuously job hunt at the county expense, regardless how you want to classify it, provided less than adequate performance for the benefits provided and continue to do so. It is time, in my opinion, for the 5 of you to recognize the path you have willingly been led down and take the appropriate action to solve an immediate lame duck issue. Terminate the county administrator and hire a search firm to provide a true administrator that believes in lead by example. We certainly do not have that in the current administration, contract or otherwise, including the deputy. 6 aluminum picnic tables.
Thank you, sir. What else?
It's Janie Everett.
Good evening. My name is Janie Everett, and I live here in Woodbine. And I'd like to speak with you this evening about the Backhaul Memorial Project being included in the fiscal year 2023 budget. This is not the first time that we have requested to be included in the budget, but I thought it was important enough to come today in person to make certain that we were heard, since no response was received. The Camden County fiscal year 2023 budget on public review today does not include any funding in support of Backhaul Memorial Museum. Backhaul Memorial Project, TMP, was established in 2015 by the citizens of Camden County as a nonprofit organization that created the museum in 2017 to honor the legacy of the Woodbine Backhaul chemical plant. Each year on the anniversary of the 1971 Backhaul plant explosion, TMP hosts and pays for the commemorative ceremony. Our museum is the nation's singular institution concerned with researching the 1971 plant explosion, documenting the plant's employment model, the explosion impact, and examining its significance in modern times. The museum has grown to include approximately 350 historical photos and artifacts. audiovisual capabilities, digital, historical files, and oral history segments. We have provided guided tours to thousands of visitors from Camden County and across the country since opening our doors in 2017. We worked with the Camden County High School students to complete oral history projects through interviews and reenactments, which the students themselves performed. Students complete their Camden County history assignments through the information learned during their museum tours. We are a source that's relied upon each year for students that are competing at the state level in history fairs regarding the Thycall history. The museum itself is a member of the Georgia Association of Museums and Galleries and was selected by the Congressional Black Caucus as the 2022 Georgia Black History Month Museum Truth in History. County funding has been the traditional method used for humanities programs in Camden County. In our letter dated February 18, 2022, sent to each Camden County Commissioner, the Camden County Administrator, and the Camden County Deputy Administrator, stated the following. We need your help in two areas. One, financial stability, and two, a permanent state of existence for the cause. If you cannot provide financial support, donate a building to house the museum. I ask that we collaborate to formulate a plan to ensure this happens. Our annual operating expenses, rent, utilities, supplies, and administrative fees total approximately $11,000. We bear the expense of hosting a yearly commemoration ceremony, costing the organization between $6,800 and $10,000 each year, plus incurring the expense of continuing to expand the museum exhibit catalog, upgrading the facility, and creating the documentary Remembering Woodbine. The Georgia Humanities Grant, or ARP grant, was sufficient to fund the general operating costs for 1 year ending in December 2022. We must now consider where we go from here and need staffing. We must have $41,000 funding from Camden County in the fiscal year 2023 budget to house the museum at $11,000 with all expenses and staff it with ample staffing of $30,000. We asked, we never get a reply, but this museum is our march toward a national Thycall Memorial Monument. We must embrace the spirit of our people that live in the 16 cities and 14 hospitals that fought to save our people. And if you know the history, every time you dial 911, you need to say thank you to the people at Thycall.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else?
Ms. Tanya Blaisdell.
Chairman Blount, Commissioners. My name is Tanya Glazebrook, and I'm here tonight as the Chair of the Camden County Joint Development Authority. Thank you for the opportunity to address the Commission. Last week, we submitted a letter to each of you respectfully requesting reconsideration of the JDA budget. I'm not going to read that letter tonight, but I would ask that the county clerk be included in the minutes. The letter was signed by every volunteer member of the Board of Directors. And as you know, that board includes appointees from Woodbine, Kingsland, St. Mary's, and the county. These are men and women who have been appointed because of their business acumen or their community expertise, and they have pledged to oversee the JDA management and fiduciary obligations. In 2014, the elected leadership of each city, as well as the county, agreed to the importance of designating 1 mil of the annual millage to adequately fund the JDA. It was actually called the JDA levy on tax bills. 6 months later, the Commission decided to reduce the JDA funding and put the 1 mil towards general economic development. And eventually, that 1 mil just went into the general fund. In our letter, we detailed how JDA has worked diligently to create the image of Camden County as a viable location for business and industry at the state level. And as you know, in Georgia, most development opportunities are initiated at the state level. So gaining the respect and the trust is critical to our future success. And by 2022, we have established the relationships necessary to be the true voice of economic development for Camden County, as everyone envisioned back in 2014. This year alone, JDA has recruited companies to Camden that will bring 125 million of financial investment and more than 200 new jobs. Our business plan for the new fiscal year details how we'll build on that momentum and bring even more investment to Camden. Our plan was accompanied by a budget request to fund JDA at a level consistent with the 1 mil agreement back in 2014, or 1.2 million. Success builds success, but progress does require adequate funding. Most successful development authorities in Georgia have multi-year funding agreements, so that permits them to plan and support projects beyond a 1 year at a time methodology. Now, we addressed that possibility in the budget discussion with Mr. Blunt and Mr. Reddy last month. And while you declined to consider that proposal for this year, we would request that it remain on the table for further discussions. The figure you're proposing for JDA this year is $684,000, a figure that's actually less than our current budget. Your overall budget reflects major increases, as highlighted in the presentation, in several departments. So we recognize that there are other departments that you have multiple requests for increases. However, we believe a reduction rather than an increase for JDA sends the wrong message. Sends the wrong message about how Camden County feels about economic development. I've heard you, Mr. Chairman, talk at length about how important economic development is to the current health and the future health of Camden County. And I believe each of you on the dais feel the same way. And that's why we should not send the wrong message locally or statewide with a reduced commitment to economic development via the JDA. Now, it's clear that you're not ready to fund at a 1.2 million in line with the 2014 agreement. But you could consider a $500,000 at today's millage rate, which would be 800,000. And barring that, at least consider a figure of 750,000 that will allow us to take advantage of our momentum and build on it. Sending the right message is critically important to what we do, and is critically important to economic development in Camden County. I'm confident the Commission agrees with the JDA that the message we need to collectively send is that Camden County is open for business. Thank you for any reconsideration that you might consider.
Thank you.
Mr. Jim Goodman.
Commissioners, I am here as a citizen, but I'm also here as what I think can be accurately described as the Republican commissioner-elect, with hopes and anticipation that whatever challenges may come in November, I will prevail. And at that point, I'll go to my last city council meeting on Monday night and my first county commission meeting on Tuesday night, God willing. And I have a message for you. It's specifically a message for 3 people at the dais: Mr. Brandt, Mr. Reddick, and Mr. Casey. And the message is that whatever your decision is regarding the disposition of ARPA funds, your campaign for reelection starts with that decision. And I'm going to make absolutely sure that the citizens are reminded of how you reacted to the impassioned pleas of citizens who stood at this dais. Let me redefine the hierarchy for you. The most important people in this room are the people out here that are citizen voters who put people like you and perhaps someone like me in charge of being a servant and being a steward for tax receipts. You've heard impassioned pleas tonight. Ms. Glazebrook got it exactly right. There's a message. I know what your message has been to voters and taxpayers. You sued me. That's what you think of me. Pardon me, but I didn't deserve it. The citizens do not deserve the high-handed treatment that they've been given. And under my service as a commissioner, at least I'll speak for myself, I won't be doing that. Now, the last time you were gathered here, as far as I know, it's the last time, a gentleman named Mr. Bessel stood right here and burned a hole right in this carpet, telling you exactly where you're making a mistake. You have been given some bad advice. Plain and simple, bad advice. And I understand you paid $87,000 per year. You haven't paid all that out at one time for that bad advice. That's unforgivable. You have been, for the last several years, been given a whole lot of bad advice, and I won't even get started on that. You know exactly what I'm talking about. For once, and again, this is particularly directed at the 3 county commissioners who are going to begin their second half of their terms, you need to listen to people who know what they're talking about. And you need to understand there will be a lawsuit or several lawsuits. And I ask you personally, don't do that to me as an incoming commissioner hopeful. I don't want to be dealing with your mistakes. So I'm challenging you. Think about what you're doing here. There is no hair on fire situation that I'm aware of that you have to make a bad decision. Drop back, think about it, get some better advice, get some good advice for change, and decide to do the right thing for the people of Camden County. Thank you very much for your rapt attention.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else, Ms. Bishop? I'm sorry.
The only other comment I have is a written comment for the record submitted by Ms. Jessica Feely, and I will incorporate that into the minutes.
All right, is there anyone else desiring to address public hearing? Board? That's it. We adjourn. Thank you.